Hey YouTube, Awesome Rider here. Welcome to my review for the Lightning Collection figures for the Omega Rangers from the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Boom Comics. If you didn't know, these are the Rangers that are created out of the storyline of the famous Peace Conference. As in the comics universe, they came up with a really cool story where instead of them going to a peace conference because of behind-the-scenes contract reasons, Jason, Zack, and Trini were secretly recruited to go on missions with the Blue Emissary around space. And then the fourth one here on the right is Kia. What a great idea, who is an alien species that joined the team and wound up becoming a villain. So I'm really happy about these. The Omega Rangers are some of my favorite parts of the comics. I really do like the designs. I've always liked them, but I've definitely grown to like them more and more. A lot of people complain about the helmets being too similar, which I understand and I don't disagree with, but I've grown to like them over time, even with the samey helmets. But bottom line is, one of my favorite sets of comic suits, both in terms of like just the suits and the story, so I'm really happy we're getting one of these before we go on hiatus, especially if the hiatus is forever. Definitely disappointed by the possibility that we could never get some of the other ones, like the Yale one, which is effectively an Animal Ranger, or the Death Ranger and his Gold Ranger counterpart, but I'm happy we're getting these. Before we dive into the figures, let me just take a quick look at the accessories. Alright, for accessories, you have their signature weapons, which are all honestly pretty good looking. There's not really a whole lot to write home about because they're all really basic colors, so there's not a whole lot to mess up. They do look like they do in the comic. I think blue in particular, because of just the way it pops, looks the most like it jumped out of the comic, but I really have no complaints here, and I do like how bendy Black Ranger's weapon is, so you can kind of get different poses. As for his hands, you just have closed fists for all of them. They all have on the, holding weapons hands right now, and then they all just have closed fists. No other options. It would be nice to maybe get one more for each, but it's not a huge want to use on display. I think it's worth noting. Also, in addition, it's worth noting that these don't have any civilian heads, which that's been a common complaint of mine amongst the line, is usually the civilian heads I want most we don't get, such as the comic ones. I still am not entirely sure what Hasbro's deal is when it comes to comic-like heads, because you have stuff like Marvel, where they do comic and cartoon-looking figures all the time for Marvel Legends. But then in Star Wars, I don't think they've ever really done cartoon-esque Black Series figures for like Clone Wars or Rebels. Usually when they do figures for characters from those series, they do a live-action spin on them, which, don't get me wrong, is cool to see, but sometimes you want to represent the animated series. And I'm not sure why it's more difficult to get an animated-looking head to represent that version of the character, but it's disappointing, especially because I love the comic versions of the characters and I kind of want one to represent them because they occupy a different space in my head. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. Let's just take a look at them here. And I have to tell you guys, I'm overall very pleased with them. One thing that's nice is, in general, I do feel the proportions are well done. I don't feel like anything feels super off. But this is like a case where you can't really judge it by like, oh, based on how I remember this looking from the show and the Sentai footage or the Ranger footage, it looks off. Because as they even mentioned in the announcement video, like the comics will have varying styles that will have the proportions be different. So it's kind of tough to do. And I think they did a really good job with them. I think the proportions all look great. They look like they could be live action versions of the characters. The helmets have a nice shine to them. I like the different materials of like the matte material here, and then you have like a shiny material on some parts. Oops, focusing on Red. There's like, Red's the star. Don't you know? He's the one with the muscles and the power. No, but yeah, it looks overall really good. I'm really happy with it, and no like major paint mistakes. There's like one tiny little gold nick paint here, but that's the only major one I noticed. The articulation's pretty par for the course. Fortunately, these molds feel very solid in my opinion. You know, obviously we've had recent molds that were cheaper from the new factory that was having problems with being brittle and stuff like that. Some of the following waves weren't as brittle, but still felt cheaper, and this feels much more in line with what I'm going to call like the classic Lightning Collection feel, kind of just around the middle time before we had super mega problems, excuse me, not super major, super mega. No, but before we had all those problems, it feels much more solid. It doesn't feel like the most high quality figure, but it feels like more so in line with the general quality of Lightning Collection, Black Series, etc. Feeling overall very solid, not cheap or anything like that, and I think the paint looks really good. I think, again, proportions on Red look really good. I think the red and gold shine and contrast really well. I love the way that they captured that sort of like matte, darker gray for this color here. Again, same articulation there overall for the guy mold and the girl mold. Obviously, the girl mold just being a little bit skinnier. And as of this moment, no loose joints or anything like that. They do all have that feel of like, not all of them, but some of them have that feel of this could become loose in the future. Like, it's not the tightest joint. Like, this will probably become loose after owning it X amount of time. But at least no loose or wobbly joints at the moment. Again, girl mold, generally the same articulation, just on a skinnier mold. Her helmet, I would say Yellow's is the only helmet that looks slightly off to me. It looks a little bit too skinny. But again, you could just kind of say like, oh, it was drawn from a different panel. So it's not a deal breaker or anything. I still think they did an overall good job on them, and I'm really happy with them. And especially, I mean, I'm excited in general to get the Omegas. Again, really cool way of taking advantage of the Peace Conference story, but in particular, I'm excited about Kias. You can see they are seemingly different. Like this one, unless it's just like maybe my imagination, but Yellow's is just a little too skinnier, and a little too skinnier. That's some good talking, Dawson. But Blue's just looks a lot more well-rounded, and I love the color blue on this. Again, Kia's one of my favorite comic characters. I thought I mean, it's not like the world's most interesting idea of like a character saying, oh, you know, the heroes are the real enemy, but I just really liked her, and I'm happy she's recently returned in the upcoming Darkest Hour, Darkest Day event. I can't remember if it's Darkest Day or Darkest Hour, but really happy with this. I think it looks really good. And one thing I really like too is like, obviously you can see stuff like the hinges for their stomach joints, but in terms of like the shoulders and all that stuff, there's a really great synergy with like the shoulder pads of them being able to move, but you can move it in such a way depending on the pose that you're able to hide a lot of the, wow, just, it all just fell apart. But what I was trying to say was, like, sometimes you have figures more so than others, you can really see the joints and the gaps and it looks weird, which is unavoidable with figures like these. They're not like a hot toy or anything where you got like the, you know, the cloth and stuff like that. So I'm not naive in thinking like you're never going to notice it's a toy, but I appreciate that these have a little bit more of a seamless quality to them. But I'm honestly just super stoked to have these. These have always been on the top of my Lightning list, and if we're going to go on a hiatus for a while or forever, I'm glad that they squeaked these out. Even if I'm disappointed that there's some other like variations of these we might not get for a long time, I'm extremely happy with them. Not just to have them, I think these are ones that even if they weren't that great, I would still just be happy to own. But I'm happy that they turned out really great and are some of my most favorite recent releases. They all look really good, they feel solid, they have solid accessories. You know, a few little minor nitpicks here and there, stuff like my still having problems with the lack of cartoon comic heads, but setting all that aside, I'm very happy with them. I don't know if they're still available at this moment. I know they sold out pretty quick, and then they did a restock. I don't know how many more restocks they'll do, but if you are interested in them and you're a fan of the Omegas, I can definitely recommend these. But that's about it this one. That's about it for this one, guys. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell. See you notifications for my videos. Dawson Rider, signing out.